Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, well, everyone, we're reaching the firmament. We are getting up on the ladder of fame. I am joined by Anna Marie Waters. She's a former member of parliament in the UK. She first started running for the Labour Party. That didn't work out so well, and she was most known for UKIP, the UK Independence Party, and she was very much involved in that whole Brexit thing that we've all long forgotten about. And now she is podcaster with us on the Soupcast Podcast Network, doing a new podcast called In Defense of Democracy. She's the author of two books, one called In Defense of Democracy. You'll never guess where we got the title and the logo from, and also Beyond Terror. And she has become a leading voice in the latest immigration and migration crisis in the UK, which you've heard so much about, and is causing people to protest and raise the old English Red Cross flag all over everywhere as shifting demographics shift and change in the United Kingdom. So, welcome, Anna, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming
Thank
on the
you.
show. Well, it's been a long journey to get to this point. We
Mhm.
have talked about this show. We've talked about doing this promotional episode sort of thing for at least this year, 9 months.
Yeah,
At least we could
at
have had a
least, yeah.
child. Yes, we could have made a baby in this time. Instead we made a podcast, which is great because you don't have to change his diapers. Um, and um, and so it's been a long road to get here, but we're so glad you just released another episode. We're recording this on the 17th of September. We just released a you just released a new episode about free speech because of course the Charlie Kirk situation is a hot topic right now.
Yeah,
And yes, and that's I think your second or third episode in your new podcast, which is very, very exciting. And I know it's been with a little bit of trepidation to kind of put yourself back out there because you got to be quite a bit of a target at one point.
yeah,
But brave on you. So why don't we start a little bit from the beginning? I don't really know this whole story that's not on Wikipedia. Why don't we start from in 2010 with the start of your deciding to run for something and get into politics and why you did and kind of what happened in the 2010s with you in UK politics.
I don't, I don't know what happened in 2010 precisely. I wasn't though a member of parliament, unfortunately. I did try to become one many, many times. Um, I think that the peak was when I ran for UKIP leader.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened in 2010, I'll be honest with you. It's all a bit of a blur.
Yeah.
But like you said, I started out in the Labour Party. And I still hold a lot of beliefs that are on the left, if you like. But
Yeah.
what they didn't do and what they had none of was consistency.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. When I lived in London, I lived in a southwest London area called Streatham. I don't know how familiar you are with London, but it's got a huge Somali community in it.
Mm.
And the female genital mutilation was rife, happening right under our noses. And I was obviously furious about this and wanted Labour. I was heavily involved. I was the secretary of the local party. I was the chairman of a branch. I was really heavily involved. And I wanted to do something, I wanted us to say something about this. We knew this was going on under our nose. It's a crime that carries a 14-year sentence in this country. And nobody said a word, even though we knew it was going on all around us. So when I brought it up at a meeting, they said, well, they literally, no, we didn't skirt around it. We can't say anything because we risk losing the Somali vote. Now, this to me is, they will pretend to be champions of racial equality, pretend to be champions of women, but do nothing about FGM because they might lose the vote of the people committing the FGM. I mean, this is outrageous. And this sort of thing was happening all the time. Sharia courts and all this sort of stuff. There was just no consistency in it whatsoever. This became a huge issue for me. Sharia law became a huge issue for me. As a law student, I first discovered Sharia law. I discovered that there were informal network of Sharia courts operating in Britain. And operating in accordance with Saudi or Iranian principles and values in Great Britain. Furious about that. I joined a campaign called One Law for All. This is probably my first foray into politics, and that was an anti-Sharia campaign. That led me down the road of getting. I read the Quran. I started to learn more and more and more about Islam rather than just the Sharia courts, and started speaking out against and about the high levels of immigration that we were seeing and what this was bringing to our country. It was bringing horrific practices like forced marriage, child marriage, FGM, all these honor violence, all this stuff into our country. And because I spoke up about that, I got into a lot of trouble with the Labour Party. So I left and I joined UKIP. I was already fairly close friends with Lord Pearson, who was for a brief period the leader of UKIP. He suggested to me that I should stand and join and run for Parliament as a UKIP candidate. So I did. For my second time running for UKIP, I was deselected by the leader of the party, who at the time was Paul Nuttall. He didn't even tell me. I found out about it the next day in the newspaper that I had been deselected. I said, right, that's it. I'm going to run for leader. And it was one of the craziest times of my life. It was also a time when I became the focus of the mainstream press for the first time. I'd been in the press, but not like this. This was an uncharted territory of being covered by the mainstream press. And they tore me to shreds. They were calling me a Nazi, a fascist, a racist. It was absolutely outrageous. In the end, I came second in that. I'm beating a whole string of big UKIP names, losing out to what was his name again? I'm not trying to be funny when I say this. I can't remember his name. Henry
Yeah.
something. Who had been Nigel Farage's sort of stooge. He only came into it late when it looked, because I was the bookies' favourite to win. The press
Henry
were predicting I'd
Bolton.
win. Henry
Yeah.
Bolton.
Yeah.
So when it looked like I was going to win, suddenly Farage dropped in this Henry Bolton character who was as dull as dishwater and
Mm.
basically nothing to say for himself, and somehow won. A lot of people thought the whole thing was rigged, but I don't think that. But I do know that a terrible smear campaign was run against me, engineered and orchestrated by Nigel Farage, who is about to become our next Prime Minister, I suspect. So I left and formed my own party. I said I would give it 5 years, see how we got on. I gave it 5 years. It was just torment after torment. The money was running out. We were standing, getting the lies were immense. I mean, I stood in a local council election, and Labour put out a leaflet during election time. Labour put out a leaflet saying that I was of the BNP. I had never been in the BNP. I'd never had anything to do with the BNP. I took this leaflet to the Electoral Commission and said, look, Labour is lying during a formal election period in election literature, telling provable lies about me. I can prove I've never been a part of the BNP. And they told me it was free speech. This is, by the way, is the same country that calls you a Nazi if you object to the genital mutilation of little girls. So and in that time, since that time, really nothing has changed. Really nothing has changed. Some people can be lied about and attacked. Some people are protected. Two-tier care, we call it. We call him Keir Starmer, because it's a two-tier country. We're all treated very differently depending on our political opinions. Nothing has changed in all that time. After that 5 years, I said, right, I think I'm done with this.
Yeah.
It had been I had realized that I had been doing this nonstop for 19 years, nonstop. And that's when I said, you know what? I would like to see what life is like without this. I would like to experience joy and a
Yeah.
normal life without all this chaos going on around me all the time. So I thought that's what I'm going to do for myself. I'm going to get out of this altogether and enjoy my life. Go live a normal life, get a normal job, and just try to be happy for a while. I still intend to do that, but it's in my blood, so I know I will return one day. But I can see the Overton window shifting in my direction. And at the moment, I'm thinking, right, just relax, have some joy in your life for a while, and let someone else shift the Overton window. And when the Overton window is in the right place, maybe go back. But that's in a very, very quick summary of the political journey.
Oh, oh, excuse me. No, I'll edit that out. uh, no, thank you. I had not heard the whole story. I'd only read about it. So that was even fascinating for myself to kind of understand the whole thing that happened. Um, I think I think there when it comes to the steep cultural differences between Muslim communities and Western communities,
Hmm.
there's a lot of trepidation, particularly in liberal and progressive spaces, where I tend to hang out. I am definitely to your left on some things. Um, there's a definite hesitation to hold our new neighbors to Western standards of behavior and legal practice and this sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I mean, we're kind of lucky we don't necessarily have the parallel Sharia court system the same way that the UK does. I saw a documentary about that years ago and I was horrified. Um, we haven't even had a conversation about FGM in this country at all, sort of thing. And we have a Somali community that stretches, I think, over 1 million people, most of whom actually live in Minnesota, of all places.
I shall be
Um,
writing about Minnesota soon. It's a
yeah,
strange
we've.
state for them to pick, isn't it? How did that
I'm
happen?
like, it's so cold there.
Yeah, they're not
Like,
used to the cold.
perhaps we should send them to Florida. I don't know. But yes, there's been a kind of a big Somali and ergo Muslim takeover in Minnesota, and there are some parts of some cities that are all Somali. Ilhan Omar, who is part of the Justice Democrats, was elected from that community in that because her district is almost majority Somali. Not quite, but it will be there by probably the end of this decade. Um, and so we haven't even begun to have those conversations. And the problem is the left pretty much refuses to have the conversation. And I don't necessarily know how that conversation goes in the UK, but in this country, the people on the right having that conversation tend to couch it in language that is it's a non-starter for the left. It's off-putting to most of the right except for the most extreme elements, and therefore it doesn't get talked about because the people doing the talking are repugnant to three-quarters of the electorate. I mean, it's like the left doesn't even want to talk to you, and half of your party would rather you go away, so you're stuck with the quarter fringe. That's who you're hanging on to. And so it never gets any mainstream potential because the wrong people are talking about it. um, we're in a migration crisis. Y'all are in a migration tsunami, sort of thing, because you're physically closer to the problem. It's easier to get there. So you're physically closer to the problem than we are. Um, what are we going to do about immigration and migration and these cultural differences? How do we even start to unwind this? Because I think most developed countries now are facing this problem and we don't know what to do. Where do we even begin?
It's very difficult. Well, the first thing you have to do with the cultural issues that you have inside your country, you have to enforce the law equally. Now, that is what I have always called for. It's just equal application of the law. And I don't really care about cultural, loyalty to culture. I care about the victim. So
Right.
if a little girl is about to have her genitals butchered, it's she is who I care about. I don't care about who's offended, whose values are offended, whose religious sensibilities are infringed. I don't care. I care about the little girl. And if we, in all honesty, if it was the case of a little white English girl, her parents took her upstairs to her bedroom, took a blade to her genitals and sliced them up, they would go to prison. but you
Right.
do it to a little Somali girl and no one cares. And the irony, the sickening irony of all this is that I was the one saying that treat the little black girl the same way as you would the little white girl, and I was the one called the racist. Whereas the people who didn't give a damn
Right.
about the little black girl were the ones calling me a racist. It's insane. Equal application of the law has got to happen. That is non-negotiable for me, and that's how you begin to deal with the cultural issues inside the country. Immigration, that is the 64 million dollars. Is it $64 million? Is that what it's called? That's that question. I don't. It's very, very tough. I think people. It's going to sound harsh, but I think people who come here illegally have to be detained. Um, they have to be held securely rather than just given hotel rooms and given apartments and given all sorts. Um, to stop the attraction, they've got to be detained to name a place to be returned to. Um, that to me has got to happen. It will immediately take away the attraction. Look, if you're living in a poverty-stricken country, and you know that if you can make your way to the UK, you will get an apartment, and they are getting apartments. This is not right-wing media hyperbole;
Right.
it's the
Yeah.
truth. They're getting nice apartments actually, and places that a lot of British people can't afford. If you know you're going to be handed that, you're going to try to do it. And if you've got to take that attraction away, but you've also got to start deporting people and detaining them until they are deported, because it's, people may think it's harsh, but sometimes life is harsh. And sometimes, in order to restore some kind of order and some kind of sanity, you've got to be harsh. And we are in a place where we are, it is chaos, it is disorder, it is insanity. You cannot, we watch people coming onto our beaches in boats and then just walking into our towns. There's no fanfare. I've seen this myself. There's no fanfare. There's no, oh, what? They just get off the boat and walk into the town. Nobody says, nobody does anything. We cannot have this. And particularly when Britain has so many enemies in the world, and there's so many terror groups and that would love to harm Britain and its people. Britain has made some enemies over the years. So has America. You cannot have people just walk into your country unvetted. You don't know who they are, what their intentions are. It's an incredible security risk, and they, the our
I do
court
think it is a small miracle,
that we
just
haven't
given
been blown
what
to
this
bits.
country has done in the last 25 years, much less what Britain has done for the last checks calendar 500 years. That some terrorist organization hasn't just gotten a sexy flight to Mexico City and walked themselves across the desert into Texas, or, yeah, just shown up in a boat, at the Severn Sea next to the new nuclear plant and just walked themselves into Somerset or something.
Right,
Um,
right.
I mean, that is a small miracle for sure.
Yeah. I don't know why it hasn't happened. I mean, we've had our share of terror attacks, but um,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think something is going to happen. Um,
No, I mean, I
Maybe
do,
even this year.
yeah, I mean, I
It's
do think,
inevitable.
I mean, I do think it is kind of a small, a small miracle
Mm,
that this has managed to not happen all of these years. I mean, especially, like I was in high school during the height of 9/11 and the whole war on terror and all this type of thing. And, there was a lot of crackdown at that time, because that was a huge concern. And I think it is a small miracle.
mm.
Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely the course of action to being pursued. I find it frustrating. I don't know if this is true for you and maybe labor or leftist movements. I find the open borders thing to be very troubling. It is very fashionable in progressive circles in this country, to be kind of like there should be no borders, open borders, no one's an immigrant, or no one's an immigrant on stolen land because we took it from the natives. You all don't have that problem. You all been there since antiquity, but we're new. We're relatively new in here in this continent. It's like there's no immigrants, all this sort of thing. And it's kind of like I find that I find that argument to be frustrating and disingenuous, that somehow we have to have open borders when, one, it doesn't make any sense, practically speaking. And for two, please name me the Middle East country that has the same policy.
Hmm.
Don't worry, we'll wait. We have
Hmm.
all the time. You won't find one. You want to talk about restrictive immigration policies? Oh, my sweet summer child. Let's talk about name a country and we'll talk about how restrictive their immigration policies are. I mean, it's, and there's no there's no sort of expectation on the other side, and I get that gets into global wealth inequality and the extractive nature of colonialism, which obviously you all excelled at more than we did. I mean, we're a product of your colonialism, sort of thing. We're a progenitor, we're the result of it, sort of thing. But even I mean, our corporations, did a very good job of running around and exploiting people. It's like East India Company, eat your heart out. Watch the Americans take it on. But and I get that's the backdrop of all of that. But from a practical point of view of today and the life of people, the lifestyles of people, the stability of communities, the social cohesion, mass migration has been a disaster.
Of course it has, because we're different. People are different. And these people who live in the world of, oh, no borders, and they really believe that everyone, every culture, every community on this planet holds the same values that they do. They don't. You can open up your borders to, let's all sit together and be. Look, some of the people you want to sit down and be friends with, they're going to kill you. And they're going to
Yeah,
take what belongs to you. Not everyone thinks like you do.
yeah,
And, we talk about there's constant beratement of white people, for instance, for being racist. Give me a break. The things I've heard black people say about Asian people, for instance, I've never heard a white person say. This is not people. The world does not look like a open border, flower in your hair, lefty thinks it does. The world is not like that. The world is a tough, rough old place. And we are very, very different in different sections of the world, hold very different values. So you may want a multicultural, open border, everyone just get along. Someone else don't want that, and they're going to kill
yeah.
you. If you welcome them to your table, they're going to kill you and take your table. Not everyone is nice. That's
Yeah. No, I mean, when it comes to, when it comes to immigration, that's one of the areas in which I am still extremely conservative. I don't know. I started out in Republican politics and became more liberal in 2011 when I got involved with Occupy. I actually was involved in the Tea Party movement in 2010 and everything. Ran a publication called Liberty Inc. Journal that was funded and backed by the Tea Party and everything. I was my first magazine. I was 21 years old. Um,
interesting.
Yeah. And then I went to Occupy for the first time as a journalist because I told my mom, I said, I think this is the big protest movement of my generation. I want to go, I want to be a part. I want to go down
Yeah.
and be there to at least say I was there for what's probably going to be the biggest protest movement of my generation. So I'm going to go. And I was right. And I'm glad I did. And I started out kind of as a journalist sort of thing. And then I got involved and I saw all the ways in which the world did not work for people. And I went home and said, oh, wow, a lot of things in this country that I've taken for granted don't exist for a lot of people. And this is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where I started to get a lot more liberal, especially on economics. However, when it came to immigration, that's one issue in which I never really moved that far left. The
Same.
open borders thing and whatnot never really resonated with me. I think a lot of these people haven't been to some of these countries to be kind of like,
Right.
I've watched dudes openly go to the bathroom in ditches in Haiti next to trucks, pull up pants if they own them, climb on a truck and ride into town. That's a thing that can happen in the world. You want the worst traffic, the most polluted rivers?
Mhm.
Hop on an Air India flight. We're going to Mumbai. Like, I mean,
Right.
the rest, I mean, we, especially if you live in a first world developed nations, Western Europe or America, we live pretty nice, cushy lives with very functional societies, and much of the rest of the world is not like that. In some countries, even if you're wealthy, it's not like that, which is why they pay for walls and security because their country is basically non-functional. Um, we have a nice thing going around
We
here.
do, but for how
And
long?
yes, and I think, I mean, in this country, I've always said you're never going to solve immigration in America until you get the corporate America off the teat of cheap labor. Simple as. It continues to be a problem because corporate America needs millions of cheap laborers.
Hmm.
Solve that, and you will solve immigration. Um, and credit to the Trump administration, I think that is what they're trying to do, sort of thing. Um, have never understood why the UK, the EU, allowed the migration crisis to go on as much as it did. You all don't need the cheap labor. I mean, if France wants to tell me about cheap labor, I'm like, well, you have a 22% youth unemployment rate. Employ your children, and your labor problem will be solved. Um, um, it's that simple. Um, Employ your kids, your labor problem will be solved. I understand why we do it in this country, but what in your view? Why has Europe let this come
I
to
don't
this
know.
point? How did
It's
we get
very
here?
tough. I do think that we don't have the demand for cheap labor, I suppose, that you do, but we do have some. I mean,
Yeah,
we constantly hear the same things. Well, these immigrants will do the jobs that the British won't do.
right,
But we have. I mean, that argument isn't made with doctors. You go to a hospital in this country, and almost all the doctors are not British, and this is an issue. And at the same time, you're reading in the newspaper about the struggles of young British medicine graduates trying to get places in the NHS, for instance, and not being able to get them. And yet
right,
almost every doctor is foreign. And you just think, well, how can that be? So it's not all about
right.
cheap labor. So what's the excuse there? And
We
there's a
have that
huge,
issue with tech in this
huge
country.
problem.
I mean,
Huge
you
problem.
go to the big tech companies, it's like we have mass unemployment in tech, and yet the chairman and CEO of almost every major American tech company is not
Not.
white. We'll be polite and say they're either immigrants themselves or the children of immigrants, sort of thing. It's become an open secret that in a lot of places hire one Indian and the whole department becomes Indian within a year because they stop hiring anyone else. And that discrimination gets us all. White people, black people, other Asian people. I mean, that's getting everybody, and
Yeah.
it's sort of thing. Um and so that yeah, yes, I mean we're having the same thing in a different industry. So I resonate with that so much because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people, I mean, especially in an industry where we're churning out graduates in this all the time. We have people who are my age and up who would love to have that nice stable job, and you have companies putting job postings in a newspaper in Kansas to say, oh, we just couldn't find anyone better H1B. That whole scandal has a lot of runway left to go
Mm.
here, sort of thing. But I mean, yes, I know I was horrified when I found out nurses were graduating and couldn't get jobs in the NHS.
Oh,
I'm kind of
and
like,
doctors.
what happened to the nursing shortage from the pandemic? Aren't you understaffed? Hire these people immediately. And I know that there's a funding issue, and the NHS had gone to Parliament and said we need money, and Parliament was kind of like, that's cute, sort of like we love that for you, but we're not writing a check, but I mean, but still, the idea. I mean, but the idea that an immigrant would be given a preferential treatment. I mean that we can discuss why that exists if that should happen, but let's get real. If you're the graduate not getting hired,
Mhm.
that's the worst feeling in the world.
Yes.
You know.
And And frankly, if you're the patient, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, this is a serious issue. If you're the patient and you're dealing with a doctor whose standard of English is not very high, and I've experienced this myself, it's
Yeah.
difficult. It's difficult. I mean, I used
Yeah.
to work in a hospital in Essex, and you would have elderly Essex people. and they are dealing with doctors who are from India or Africa, and this is cardiology, so it's serious
Right.
stuff.
Yes.
And the patient doesn't understand what they're being told,
Yeah.
because they're British, they're so polite, and it's yes, yes, okay. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And they walk
Yeah.
out of that room not having really, not fully understanding what's happening because there's such a barrier between the patient and the doctor. It's a serious, serious issue. And
Yeah.
there's no reason for that. That doesn't cover, well, the immigrants are doing the jobs the British don't want to do because,
No.
hey, no, it's probably the highest status job in society as a doctor. So who doesn't want, and also,
Right.
but at the same time, we're hearing about all these British medicine graduates not getting into the NHS. Yeah, you see, I always say things don't happen for just one reason. So
Mm.
there's a few reasons why this immigration is happening. There's a huge left wing. The media is very left wing and places a lot of pressure on politicians to not, to have this open border world. Our journalists are often the very deluded people that you're talking about. These people who think everyone is, let's open the borders. No, but and they help shape public opinion, and they don't shape it as much as the politicians think they do. But the politicians think they do. So what the politicians read in the paper, they think is public opinion, and it isn't.
Mm.
And they often they don't want to be attacked by the press, so they toe the line, a line that is set down by left-wing journalists. That's part of it. I do think there's some international pressure as well. The United Nations, the European Union, various other things, who will go crazy if the West has any restrictions on immigration. It will suddenly be a human rights abuse. But if a country won't allow Jews into its territory, the UN, for instance, is completely silent. But if the West says, right, no more immigration, then the UN will have something to say about it. But it doesn't have any, and when we had this, when the migration crisis really started in 2015, no Muslim countries would take their fellow Muslims.
Yeah.
But if the West had said, we're not taking any Muslims, this is culturally we would have been human rights abusers, and you get the idea. It's a double standard on a global stage as well. The West is expected, because we're wealthy, we're expected to take everyone and anyone all the time. Well, look, if we do that, we won't bloody be wealthy anymore. We've got this society that exists, and like you say, we have it nice. But for how long? How can we maintain our standard of living if the borders remain open? It won't. We can't. We can't. And you can see it in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You said people, these lefties have never been to some of these countries. Well, I haven't either. I've been to India. I've been to Costa Rica. Those are the only non-first world countries I've been to. But you don't have to. You don't have to, because you have to go into some neighborhoods right
Yeah.
here in Britain to see. They're completely different. You think you had stepped into another planet, and you're still in Britain. So you don't even need to go abroad to see what it's like. And it's
No,
not
I
like
mean,
it. Not like mainstream Britain. It's not. Doesn't look like it. Doesn't feel like it. It's not.
yeah, I mean, this isn't, yeah, I think it's a bit more, I think especially for Britain and Europe, it's more pronounced simply on a matter of land area.
Yes.
America's huge. It's London to Moscow. That's New York to Los Angeles. We have the space to spread them
Right.
out in a way that you guys do not. We can stash them in North Dakota and never have to think about them ever
Absolutely.
again.
I've actually made that very point before, that America is so
Yeah.
big, you guys just don't see it. We're all on top of each
Yeah.
other, and that's why we know. But
No,
you
but
want so much space, you don't. Yeah.
and for me, it's a struggle because on the one hand, I do I do love the diversity. I do love the food. I do love the new culture. When I lived in Seattle, I lived in the International District, was the old Chinatown.
Mm.
The street signs were printed in four languages: English, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. Ballots in King County are printed in 27 languages. And at one time, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Columbia City in Seattle is the place with the most languages spoken in the entire country. And I thought that was one of the coolest, most amazing things ever. And it was kind of a point of pride at one time. Like, yeah, and our city still works and things are still fine and all this sort of thing. And I had moved back to the East Coast where I am now. And I was talking to a friend of mine and I was explaining, and he's like, what do you mean they print ballots in 27 languages? And I said, well, yeah, the old Japanese grandma who came here after the war has never really learned English, sort of thing. I don't know what is wrong with me today. So sorry. Um, she's never really learned English, and we have a lot of new people who, it's easier for them to read in their own language. We even have it in Amharic for the Ethiopian community, sort of thing. And he was horrified that that sort of thing was happening in an American city, in a county, in, the home of Starbucks, Boeing, Amazon, Microsoft. I mean, one of the, a huge tech hub where it's San Francisco, Seattle. I mean, we're right there,
Mhm.
sort of thing. And I mean, and billions of dollars of shareholder value comes out of that town every year. And he was absolutely horrified. And it was a little bit of a gut check. Um, and I really had to think about if that was really the asset that I thought it was, that I had been told it was, that I had really incorporated. Um, and and that was one. The other one, and I have these what I feel like we're losing the country moments. I was getting off 95, which is the big interstate that goes north to south from Florida to Maine. And I was in Delaware, a home in Delaware, and I was getting off, and there was a man selling flowers on the off ramp. Incredibly dangerous. Okay, people are coming off this off ramp at 90 miles an hour, and it's the East Coast. No one knows how to drive here. Um, and he was selling flowers on the side of the road, and I said, I'm used to seeing that in second and third world countries. It's very common. I'm not used to seeing it in this country. I don't know that I want it happening here in Wilmington, as a matter of course, purely out of his own safety, but also that's not something I necessarily want happening in my city, sort of thing. And I kind of called my mom and I said, I had one of those, I feel like we're losing the country moments today. This man was selling flowers in an off ramp, sort of thing. And liberal as I am, and open minded as I am, and I am an overeducated East Coast elite who lives in a very, very blue state, who's lived in blue states for the past 15 years. Even I am like, guys, I think we got a problem. Like, I think we might have let things get a little out of control,
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Literally, it is out
Yeah.
of control. No one's
Eh,
controlling it.
yeah, and that's where I think, I think, I mean, I know it's probably a very hard thing to do, in this country, the pressure to assimilate into American culture used to be a lot more than it isn't anymore.
Hmm.
And I think that has given people a certain permission to maintain a lot of emotional, psychological, and in many cases physical ties, to their home country and families. When Trump complains about remittances and people sending money home, he's spot on. There are countries whose economy is dependent on people coming to this country and making money here and sending it home. And if we stopped the flow, which they put a tax on it, it's very small, but they put a tax on it. Stop the flow, whole countries' economies would collapse, sort of thing. Um, and and I know that's also becoming a problem in Europe and Britain as well. And it's just all these little. I feel like immigration is the situation where it's kind of become death by a thousand cuts.
Hmm.
Of it was kind of fine at first, and you were kind of like, okay, we can handle this, we can get through this, we'll figure it out, we'll find a way. They seem like nice people, don't they? Sort of thing, because we have that sort of, well, let's be polite, British, because we're a former British colony. We have that British, let's be polite and try to be welcoming thing too. Thank you, y'all. We got it from y'all. Everything, and they seem like nice people, sort of thing. And but then years pass and more has happened, and it's just gotten out of hand.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's I mean, politically speaking, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in this country, the immigration problem at all levels, both legal and illegal, for students, H-1B work, which is our tech worker problem, all this type of thing, the whole thing is becoming
Mhm.
untenable.
Yeah, same, same.
Here it's starting to become something politically, it's becoming untenable for anybody to kind of be against it. I mean, how is it in the UK? Is Labour doing anything? They won that landslide election, not that you'd know it, but they won that landslide election. It's like, what are they doing to
Nothing.
unwind this?
Nothing. Nothing at all has changed. And legal immigration is probably a bigger problem than illegal immigration. And what they wanted, the only response that seems to happen is, well, open up routes for the illegal immigrants. So make that legal as well. Nothing at all. Nothing has changed. And we have gone, the British population of the UK now is only about 75% or lower.
Yeah,
And that has happened we've gone from around to above from 85, 86% about 10 years ago. Don't quote me on those numbers but it's around that. And it might,
yeah,
but we've dropped by 10% in about a decade.
yeah,
So, and if this continues, the estimation is, even by the left wing, the Guardian will say that Britain will be minority British by 2050, which I think is actually being quite generous. It's
yeah,
probably going to happen a lot sooner than that. Already, London is minority British. Birmingham, the second biggest city in England, is minority British. So those are the two biggest cities in England where the people who own this country, who built this country, who've been in this country since what? I don't know. They evolved here, I guess.
1066. How far back do you
Um,
want to
so,
go?
yeah, and
Yeah.
they are now the minority in England's two biggest cities. So the writing's on the wall. My concern is that if somebody half reasonable doesn't deal with this, then somebody unreasonable will. And we could end up with somebody very, very, very nasty rising to the top. I'm worried about the immigration continuing. I'm also
Yeah.
worried about who might put a stop to the immigration and what else are they likely to do. We might get some very, very nasty people rising, and I don't want that any more than I want the immigration. I want something reasonable and sane to
Yeah.
solve this and to deal with this before the nasty people really before they get here.
No,
Totally neo-Nazis and genuine fascists and
yeah.
yeah, but people will become so tired of the immigration that they will say, well, look, I don't want neo-Nazis, but it's better than this. Just let them sort out the immigration, and
We're
then
all
we're in a whole heap of trouble.
we're already pretty much there, sort of thing. Especially with Stephen Miller and some of the people Trump has surrounded himself with, we're kind of already there. And that was kind of anticipated. I think I certainly didn't understand what a big mover it was for people. I think a lot of people didn't understand until very recently how much relatively politically uh uninvolved people were really bothered by some of the changes that they were seeing within society. And I've been surprised when talking to people who are relatively offline, relatively not into news and politics,
Mm,
how hot of an issue that has become.
mm,
And I agree. I think it is a huge. I think it's a huge political liability at anyone to not be willing to address immigration at some level. I'm not unhappy about deporting criminals and illegal immigrants from this country.
mhm.
I'm not happy with how they're doing it.
Sure.
Sending people to some hole in El
Right.
Salvador where you can never escape from,
Yeah.
with very little process, all this type of thing, is in for me very unacceptable.
Sure. I agree.
And they're gonna send that poor man from Maryland to Africa, a sort of thing. So that's, I'm not necessarily happy about that, but in principle, I'm on board with the idea. broad stroke sort of thing, I'm on board with the idea because I think we do have to, stem the tide somewhere, somehow. And I think and I think this is starting in Britain now too. It has brought out a nationalism that this country hasn't seen since about this time last century. And it's very easy for things to get very draconian very quickly. And as someone who's a person of color in this country, that tends not to end very well for us. We kind of end up being collateral damage when that happens. So that has me a bit nervous about what's going to happen with that. Because we, be glad you don't have our racial issues. And so it's, but I think but I think that's what's starting to come out of people. I think that's why, people are putting the, English flags up everywhere. I mean, I think that we're kind of like, okay, we're under attack. I mean, people call it an invasion, which I think is maybe a bit heavy handed, but I think that's how people feel. We're being attacked. We're being taken over. They're trying to drive us out.
Mhm.
Well, we better start fighting back. We better start fighting back, by and I think it'll start initially with protests and things like that, but then pretty soon it becomes any means
Mm.
necessary.
Mm.
And in this country, that could lead to armed conflict quite quickly because we have more guns than people. So for us, the shots will be firing, sort of thing. Um, if they think they have a knife crime problem before, wait till they decide to go after the immigrants. Um, yeah, I think I have a sneaky. I think you're right. If somebody level-headed doesn't, I think the ship has kind of sailed for us. I think we're kind of going down this road. For Britain, I think if someone doesn't get a handle on this quickly, it's going to go into very dangerous territory.
Yes, yes, it is.
And so,
There is a surge of nationalism. I don't even know if I'd call it nationalism. There is nationalism in there. But I go out of my house, I drive just for seconds. I'm driving only for seconds when the flags start to appear. This is all
yeah,
new. Driving up to the supermarket, I'm driving past a load of flags. I don't think it's a hard-handed or a heavy-handed nationalism. I think it's a people saying this is Britain.
right.
We're putting up our flag because this is Britain,
Yeah.
and remember that. And I think they're people are feeling their national identity being taken from them, and they are putting up their flags as a reminder to everyone and anyone. You may be here, but this flag is flying to remind you where you are. And I think for a lot of people, that's what it is. But on the other hand, there is a heavy-handed nationalism arising at the same time. I think it's still pretty small, but if this continues, it won't be small and it won't be powerless for long. And that's my worry.
No, I agree. And I think we're maybe 5, 10 steps ahead and it's already getting into quite difficult territory. And I mean, and I think, yeah, I think for, liberal leftist parties throughout the Western world, this is a huge blind spot. It's a hot issue. And for better or for worse, most of the mainstream left is on the wrong side of it, you
Yes.
know. And I think yeah, and I understand, defending immigrants. And I mean, especially in this country, immigrants have been a huge value add. I mean, we would not have Steve Jobs without immigration. We wouldn't have a lot of things without immigration. It has been, part and parcel of this country since the word go,
Sure, it has. I have a lot of relatives there myself.
Right.
But I think there has been an understanding for the most part that when you go to America, you live under the Constitution and you
Yes.
become part of it. You become an
Yes.
American. Who was it that said, was it Reagan who said, people can come from everywhere and become an American? But
Yes.
they accept and adopt the values of the Constitution. That's not happening anymore.
And I think that's the big change that people
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
seeing. And when you have a lot of leading voices, and when I say leading voices, I really just mean Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. When you have, these sort of people, sort of, especially, our country is a country that's an idea.
Mm.
We don't have an ethnic, we don't have that ethnic base that European countries do.
Mhm.
Our country is an idea. Our country is a concept. It's an experiment. And the fact that the whole world is here has produced the greatest country since Rome. It has produced more wealth than probably any human should ever, hold or be in charge of, sort of thing. It has been very, very, very successful. But the reason of that success is that we have a system that generates that success, and we made everyone comply with it. And lo and behold, when we stop really kind of ratcheting that down,
Right.
the wheels have started to fall
Right.
off the wagon.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so, and it puts me, I mean, like I said, this is an issue I'm very conservative, but it puts me in a hard position because I'm also a racial minority in this country.
Mm.
I know what the history has been for, me at a very small level, for my ancestors at a much bigger level. My father was the son of sharecroppers in Alabama, and he grew up
Right.
during Jim Crow. So, sometimes I feel like we have to be a little bit careful because sometimes this comes back on us. And I people don't really necessarily think about it this way, but sometimes, for some people, being black in America, they don't think of you as an American, and all of a sudden you're getting grouped in with the immigrants too. So you kind of have to. It's a very awkward position for me to kind of, be in, and so I understand why the left kind of went in the direction it did. But in my mind, if you're not willing to address the fact that we're taking in all these people, we're not incorporating them into society, they don't really want to be incorporated into our society, all this sort of thing, you're gonna have a very hard time, if not an impossibility, of winning elections. This is a hot issue for people,
Mm.
and if I were anywhere near Keir Starmer right now, I would say, do you people hate having power? Do you like losing elections? Because all the stuff that you're doing is a great way for them to throw you out. And you've got like 2.5 years. Like, you've got to turn the ship around. And I feel like there's just no one in number 10 who
Yeah.
cares about the crisis that's happening a mile from the building,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm
It's,
hearing, I mean, the sources are apparently saying that Starmer will be gone by May, but
yeah.
who will replace him is another matter. I mean, it'll be another Labour. It'll be Labour are not going out. Labour, I suspect, I'll be very surprised if Labour call an election anytime sooner than they have to by law. I think Labour will hold on as long as they possibly can. But I
Yeah.
don't think Starmer won't last for very much longer. I suspect that he'll be gone next year. But who replaces him is that? It could be someone even worse. It could be
Yeah,
David
no,
Lammy. It could
absolutely.
be Sadiq Khan. Who knows? And then if it was Sadiq Khan, then the place will go up in flames at that point, I think.
Well, we have an extra room, so come on over. It's yeah, no, it's very well. I This has been fascinating. We got a late start. I have another recording in 15
I
minutes, but
know, I know.
this has been
It's been
absolutely
lovely talking to you.
delightful and wonderful and
We'll do it
lovely.
again because I could continue
Yeah.
this conversation actually.
No,
Gosh.
we will. Yeah, no, absolutely. We will do it. So why don't we do this? Why don't you let us know where we can keep up with you online and you Substack, so get the podcast, all that type of thing. Let us know about all that so people can go check in with you.
Yeah, my Substack is Anne-Marie Waters, one word. I don't know if I need to say that, but I'm technically still living in 2005. AnneMarieWaters.substack.com, and on Twitter, AMD Waters. I don't use Twitter a great deal because I think it's a bit of a nightmare. I've always thought that about Twitter. I'm not Elon Musk's biggest fan, but I've always thought
Mhm.
that about Twitter. I think it's a bit.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about social media. This is another conversation, which I could easily get into. But that's where to find me. AnneMarieWaters.substack.com or on Twitter, AMD Waters. That's
Yes,
my
if people want
entire
to.
online presence there, by the way. I don't do anything else.
Yes, and if you want to hear the podcast, just look up In Defense of Democracy. It's on all the major channels, Apple, Spotify. If you're listening to this right now, you can just go to the search bar and subscribe. So thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
coming on the Cameron Journal
No
podcast.
worries, Cameron. Thank you very much.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.